It's the Stasi. When Ray lived in East Germany. Leipzig or Dresden.
Leipzig, rather, yeah. I wonder how much time collectively we've all spent in Germany, just added up. I wonder if we could make a month out of it.
Probably.
I bet we could, yeah.
I haven't been there in a while.
Oh, I guess I racked up a lot of points there back in the day.
Yeah.
Traveling around,
But last time I was there for like 2 weeks, I think.
Yeah. Maybe months.
Huh.
Well, if it hits a year, we got to stop.
Yes.
I think. We have to keep track of that.
I don't know. Can I get a pension if I spend enough time there?
Ooh, yeah, that's a really good idea. How do we get that German pension?
Well, I think you need to work there for 5 years.
Legally?
Yeah, 5 years and then you have a pension.
5 years? That's not bad.
It's not bad. I think you get the minimal pension then, which is, I don't know, a few €100.
Can we just have our podcast be based out of Germany?
I mean, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
I have to see which countries have more lucrative, like Denmark or something.
Okay. Yeah. Huh. Well, this is fun. I like this idea.
Yes.
Whoever. Yeah. We're gonna have the welfare states competing over us.
Yeah. It can be a German podcast. Why not?
We could. Yeah.
Well, we have listeners in Germany. Some.
Yeah.
Although no official German tier listeners.
That's true.
Very disappointing.
That is true. Yeah. Maybe we got to change it to someone who does support us, like Denmark.
I mean, if anyone does that kind of self-punishing thing, it would be Germans, I think.
Yeah. Agreed.
Okay. Yeah. Maybe we just didn't emphasize how much they owe this podcast in the description,
True.
We didn't talk enough about family members killed by Germans, I think.
Yeah, maybe. We got to really drive that home to get that $25 a month. Yeah.
It's 50, actually.
It's 50. Well, that's probably why we don't have any. But how about this? I promise that if we get our first German tier listener, I will stop using my German accent.
Ooh. No, because that's part of the punishment. They need to.
Yeah.
I'll take $50 for that.
Reparations.
I'll get paid $50 a month to avoid a joke. It's fine. That's a good deal, I think. I will avoid a joke for $50 a month. Any joke you want.
Remember when you and I were in Germany, Fritz, and we were just reading off anything like road signs
that's
or
the best
trucks
part about being
and trying
in
to
Germany.
make them into like weird sex jokes.
Oh, it's the best part of being there. And it's easy to get carried away, I gotta say.
I think I have a video of you doing that. Just like sitting there and like looking out the window and just be like, Ausfahrt.
Well, Ausfahrt is pretty easy.
One's easy, yeah.
That's clearly a German word for butthole.
Isn't what's Dr. Falcon was telling me some fun words. Krankenhaus is fucking hospital, and Krankenwagen.
Yes, the Krankenwagen. Yes.
Oh, it's on the Krankenwagen.
Yeah, this is why no one's given us $50. It's because of this. Because we can't be adults about the German language.
Yes.
What's their word for asparagus? It always cracked me up.
Okay, we have 5 minutes of bashing Germans.
I think we can go for 15. Spargel. The Spargel. Spargel. Yeah, take your hands off my Spargel. This is not that kind of club. Oh, he's wearing his Spargelhosen. That might even be funny in German. I don't know. Asparagus pants. That's worth a giggle.
And I'm back.
Great. Did you bring your Spargelhosen?
Spargelhosen. 9.
Fuck off. They're like the best pants.
Yeah, fuck off.
All right. Let's see if an episode is in here somewhere. Welcome back to The Empire Never Ended with Boris, Fritz, and Ray.
You.
Hey.
We're doing UDBA TV today.
We are.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's yeah.
I think this is kind of a laid-back episode for the free listeners.
Yeah.
We usually don't do film-type ones.
The sun's out. We're all feeling chill. Everybody's cats are on various balconies.
That is true.
Laying in sunbeams. It's that kind of day.
Basking in the sun.
Yeah, this is definitely a Patreon-type episode that we're doing as a free episode. But yeah, let's try and see.
Well, the patrons are busy. They've got all sorts of weirdness they're dealing with over there.
They do, yes.
Yeah.
We're
like telekinesis
and shit like that. And Egyptian gods telling you about common European mushrooms.
And, weird tobacco money funding paranormal research.
Anything Mahmoud Muftich has ever touched. This is not it. Well, kinda. It's related. I guess some of his buddies are going to get caught up in this edition of Cops Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
This Ustasha thought he was clever.
So, today we're going to talk about, I guess, we're going to talk about a series that addresses a thing that we kind of touched on before in earlier episodes in this arc, specifically in this Ustasha sub-arc. And that's a 1983 four-part TV series produced by Zagreb Television called Traps in English.
Zamke in original, yeah.
Yes. It tells the story in a very kind of somewhat dull and didactic way of the story of Operation Gvardijan. There are other Operation Guardians. That the Yugoslav secret police operation to break up the stay-behind Crusader units, which is something you guys are probably familiar with now, since we talked about them in a few episodes. And their kind of clever plan to disrupt this network and fool some of the guys abroad into basically coming into the country and getting arrested.
Yeah, it's a very crazy story.
Yes.
So Ustasha's had this idea that, after the Second World War, that there is a resistance movement in Yugoslavia of these Križari, or so-called crusaders, who were, as you said, the staying-behind units that they left there, and that they could just come back and make this resistance movement even bigger and take the power again from the communists.
Which you have to wonder why they thought that, because they've never had particular success with any of these operations, even before the war, they didn't have functional state, so...
They worked so hard during the war to appeal to people's hearts and minds,
Yes.
Surely, after the umpteenth massacre, they'll have convinced people that they're good dudes.
It just confirms that Ustashas are one of the most the craziest movements that ever existed.
Sure. I'm really happy to admit that.
They're just completely nuts.
Yes.
You can also it was pretty brave what they did, but it's more just completely insane.
I don't think it's brave if you're crazy, though. It's just crazy then, It's brave if you have a full rational sense of the world and what's real and not real in it, and you're going to risk something and you do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. I don't think any of those words describe any Ustasha ever.
No.
Well, true, but lots of these Nazis that we cover are kind of, okay, they're I don't want to encourage them to be more like Ustashas, definitely. But I'm saying that they really kind of did stuff, and this is when you think about it. So the Ustasha regime, we talked about it, basically, wouldn't exist if there was no Third Reich behind them, and then they established this terror regime that was the only thing they actually did was slaughter people and have concentration camps, and that's what they did for 4 years, and then they were kicked out of the country by a massive partisan movement, which was, very strong in the whole Yugoslavia, but also especially in Croatia.
Yeah.
To a great degree because of the massacres that Ustashas did, so everyone was against them.
Yeah.
And, you even had a more, the partisan movement which was a guerrilla movement, was more of an actual state than the independent state of Croatia was. And that's even according to the Nazis.
Right. There's that famous report back from one of the, German generals who is breaking down all the different factions and basically says, oh yeah, and the communists, they run civil infrastructure and have a well-organized system of command and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, their description of the Ustasha is they can barely hold on to anything, falling apart. We need to get them in order. And,
Yes.
Yeah. And then, they slaughter hundreds of thousands of people. They have these concentration camps, which were some probably the worst in history.
Sure.
And then there is this, they barely escape. Many of them, many don't escape. There is this whole retaliation kind of massacre of Ustashas and people who were, seen as their supporters, although some of them were probably innocent, at Bleiburg,
right,
and so on. And then just a few years later, in 1947, some of them decide to come back, which is pretty insane.
Yes.
After all of that,
yes,
and especially the people they decide to send. The first group that decided to come back was one guy who was the head of the Jasenovac concentration camp at some point, and the other was the head of the Stara Gradiška concentration camp. So they are sending, concentration camp guys in 1947.
They're literally returning to the scene of the crime.
Yeah.
And not particularly, those are pretty high profile guys to smuggle back in, right? I mean, it doesn't seem like, I don't know, if you wanted to carry out some sort of clandestine guerrilla operation, you'd think you would recruit from people who wouldn't necessarily be recognized immediately if they were caught, which,
right.
Former camp commandants don't really fall into that category as much.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pretty big file on all those guys.
Yes. And I mean, also the fact that these are the guys who came back also shows that, what this movement was about.
Yeah.
They're best people were guys who were running concentration camps because that's mostly what they did.
And that's what they wanted to keep doing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
To the point that even when Luburic later on, and we talked about this in the little mini-series on him, but when he gets in a fight with Pavelic and stuff, he's like, well, we're going to have to open even more camps, and this time for traitors too. It was
it's just
that he had one thing on his mind, and that's
just
opening up camps.
He just loved camping.
Because he
loves camping people.
That's the basis of any good society.
Yes. Concentration.
Networks of death camps.
Yes.
According to Ustashas and the Temple of Blood, basically.
Yeah, they get along there.
Yeah. So, I mean, okay, this is
I don't know that they'd get along. Sorry. I don't know. I think the whole, trying to bring back Charonzon, the lurker of the deep or whatever, might rub them the wrong way back then.
Who knows?
But they also said that they were Persians and that they were Catholics and Muslims, but I'm sure there were some weirdos that were probably oh, let's go back to Zoroastrianism or something.
Okay.
Yeah, so needless to say, this whole operation by the Ustashas in 1947 and 48 was a spectacular failure.
Yeah.
And this is what this TV show from 1983 is about. And it's a kind of a strange TV show.
Yes.
But I found it somehow intriguing, and I liked watching it, although it's very slow. It has 4 episodes that are 45 minutes long each, so it's 3 hours, and it's very repetitive, which for me makes it almost as a kind of a comedy. Because you're watching the same scenes over and over again.
You mentioned that new person.
Yeah.
In the first, when I was watching the first episode, I took pretty extensive notes, and then I started the second episode, and I was like, oh, this is almost exactly the same formula.
Yeah.
And then by the time I got to the third and fourth, I wasn't even writing notes so much, just kind of taking note of who they were talking about, because it follows the same exact formula. And it's curious. I was trying to situate it genre-wise. Because there's a lot of, we've talked about some of this in ARC too, but like Yugoslav partisan films and like TV shows about, World War II and the national liberation struggle and all this other stuff. And a lot of them, take their cues from like, Western action movies or Westerns or stuff like that. They're very action-packed and dynamic and have star power and all this other stuff going for it. In this series, I can't tell if they wanted, it's like they didn't know whether they wanted to make like a documentary or like, a fiction series. So they do kind of both, and it is kind of a fictionalized account, but using like voiceover narration to explain like who people are in a very like documentary kind of way. And then it ends, of course, with documentary footage as well. So it's an odd thing to watch because you're trying to get like relate to the characters, and all of a sudden the characters who, oh, by the way, are all like Yugoslav secret police guys. So this is kind of telling it from their side. And maybe they are that boring. You know what I mean? That's the kind of guy that gets into that job. Because you're just watching it and you're like, okay. And then narrator comes on. He was like, so and so was born in 1908 in the town of blah blah blah. He went to school in da da da, and then during the war he was in charge of this, that, and the other thing. And he explains all that, and then it just goes back to the show, basically.
Okay.
And it's like that in every single episode, sometimes multiple times in the same episode.
Yeah, I mean the way the show starts is like the first scene is a bunch of 3 or 4 Ustashas wandering the forests of Croatia, and they're like in a bad shape. They just came illegally through the Hungarian border. And they're trying to find the Crusader stay-behinds, and they're not finding them. Right. And they're in bad shape, again desperate.
And kind of depressed, too, right?
And depressed, yes.
Yeah.
So, and one of those guys is Ljubo Miloš, that's the head of the Jasenovac concentration camp, and the other guy, I forgot the name, he's the...
It's Ante Vrban.
Yeah, Vrban, was the head of the Stara Gradiška concentration camp, and they're like both like people who personally killed many people, including with knives and lots of civilians and so on.
And like admitted it too, it wasn't.
Yes, yeah. And they're like getting angry and having fights between themselves. Like, why are they not? Because the Vrban was in Yugoslavia the year before already. Yeah. And kind of set up some of these stay-behind units and left them there.
Yeah, he said like we left these guys behind there in the Papuk, whatever. It's a national park now in Croatia, right?
Yeah.
We left them here, and they're nowhere to be found.
Yeah, dropped them right at this tree
a year ago.
Where are they?
And what they don't know is that all of them were already destroyed, killed, or imprisoned, and so on. Which kind of like it's very interesting that they would do something like that. Just go back to Yugoslavia and think they will find Ustashas in the forests.
Yeah.
Pretty strange. And then by accident, they just stumble upon a guy, like a civilian kind of peasant-looking guy walking through the forest, who was actually working for the Yugoslav State Security. But that guy managed to persuade them that he's one of their guys, that he's actually a crusader.
Because he knows stuff about them. Was that what happened? Like they have the gun to his head and he convinces them that...
he was like very kind of... He managed to say the right things. And he mentioned the name, how he works for a Ustasha guy who was... Vrban, one of those Ustashas there, knew personally.
Right.
And he said like he's like my officer or something like that, and I will go back to our camp. I can't take you now because it's a very difficult situation. We need to take precautions. So I will go back to the camp and notify my officers that you are here, and then if everything is okay, I'll come back for you tomorrow evening. Yeah. And he mentions the right name of the guy. And that guy that he mentions actually exists. It was a real guy. And it is explained to us that the name that he mentioned was an Ustasha guy, but the state security Yugoslav people say he was actually not a bad guy. Like he was an Ustasha, but he was not a war criminal. He temporarily joined the Ustashas in order to help like a family member who was in the concentration.
I think his dad,
yeah, who was in a concentration camp or something like that. So that's how the show tells us that it's okay that the Yugoslav cops work with this former Ustasha guy.
Right.
And then tomorrow evening he indeed comes back with that Ustasha guy, the good Ustasha guy, who is working with the new government, unknown to the Ustashas who are about to be arrested, and with a bunch of Yugoslav state security cops who are pretending to be crusaders.
Yeah.
And they meet and greet and are very happy to see each other, and they start walking. And after some hours, they set up a camp to rest, and they talk there. And at some point, one of the Yugoslav state security guys gives a code, and they're all arrested. And the code is Jozo, give us the water, give us some water.
And that's kind of the catchphrase of the show.
Yeah.
Because that's every time they start arresting Ustasha, they do it by saying, Jozo, bring me the water. And then, the cops come out and arrest them all.
Yeah. So in every episode, there are 4 of them. At least there is one scene when that happens.
Yeah.
Which makes it kind of funny. I don't know, because that's basically this what I describe now is the whole show. This happens many, many times.
Yes.
And this happens because so they arrest them, they take them to Zagreb, they imprison them, and they start interrogating them. And Ljubo Miloš, the head of the Jasenovac concentration camp, he gets very depressed and he's pissed off. He feels that he's been treated badly by the Ustasha leadership that's abroad, who sent him back to Yugoslavia while they're safe, in Austria or wherever they are. And he just starts talking to the cops and he tells them everything. And they even find a paper which describes a radio code that they will use to talk back to Ustashas, abroad. And Ljubo Miloš explains everything about his code, how to use it and what means what and so on. So the Yugoslav state security is now able to talk to Ustashas abroad and to tell them everything's fine, it's great here. Yeah. You should come. Yeah. And this is how they get 96 or 94 of them to come to Yugoslavia in different groups and basically arrest all of them with this Jozo give me water, give me water type of trick that they do. And so these state security people, we usually refer to this agency throughout this show as UDBA. Mm-hmm. But this is so early on that they are still called OZNA.
Yeah,
these are 40s, so they still had their original name, which wasn't how they were named also during the Second World War. Yeah, which is short for the Department for the Protection of the People. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, they also have at this point they have a uniformed kind of military part of them. So we see those. Mm-hmm. All of these OZNA people wearing uniforms and so on. And they are officers of KNOI, which is it's short for the Corps for the Protection of the People of Yugoslavia or something like this. And this was an armed kind of military part of state security, OZNA. Mm-hmm. And it was abolished. It was founded in 1944 and it was abolished in 1953. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of interesting because in some weird sense, KNOI, or these people, the guys who arrest Ustashas, in some weird sense, they're almost the kind of a weird precursor to the Red Berets in some sense. Mm. We talked about the Red Berets when we were on the Radio War Nerd podcast. We didn't talk about them on our podcast, but we probably will again at some point. But in a sense, these two formations are related because they are military units of the secret police. They are not police or military.
Yeah, I mean the Soviets had that too. The NKVD had its own armed divisions. It's interesting in some ways because they're also continuing. They're still fighting a war that's over, right? They're a military unit engaged in at this point a counterinsurgency operation. and still very much in this kind of war mentality.
Yes.
Even though, of course, the war is over officially.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny how they are portrayed. They're very kind of stoic and dignified. But also they wanted to humanize them somehow. They like make some jokes and like take care of each other's families.
Mm-hmm. Well, they do have a sense of humor because in the real story, I mean, we'll get to that at the end, but like in the real story, they do fucking literally troll the Ustashas after they've arrested them all. In a pretty hilarious way. So, you know, I guess they I mean, you know, when we did the Fail Nazis episode about the attempted Serbian stay-behinds, when you, Ray, were reading that book that was written basically by state security guys, they also kind of trolled and made fun of them.
They did, yes.
Throughout. So, I mean,
it's true, yeah.
They intimately knew their enemy, I think. Could say that.
I mean, yeah, this is like an amazing thing because this lasted for, I don't know, a year or something like this.
Yeah.
Some months in 47 and 48, and they were in regular communication with these Ustashas and telling them it's safe for them to go back to Yugoslavia, which they did. I don't know in how many groups, but all in all, it was more than 90 of them who came back. And many of them were like very high up, kind of important Ustashas.
Yeah, because they thought like things were popping off and that they were, you know, about to get back into power. And, you know, something that from the first episode on, you know, they're talking about like the geopolitical situation at the time. And this is interesting coming from, you know, the episodes that we just did, is that they, you know, they keep on saying, well, you know, the Anglo-Americans have our back.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Because this is, of course, before the Tito-Stalin split, which happens in the last episode. And, you know, the Americans are against the Yugoslavs at the time. And we know that this is the time when Ustashas are reaching out to, you know, various different letter agencies of Western countries trying to get support for, you know, their cause. And so, you know, this is recalling that.
Yes. Yeah, the word Anglo-Americans is mentioned many, many times.
Many times. Surprisingly many.
Yeah. Both by like the Yugoslav State Security and the Ustashas. They all talk about Anglo-Americans all the time. So the idea that the Ustashas had that there would be a war between the West and the Soviet Union, and when it happens, they say we'll be back in Zagreb in 24 hours. So basically, they were basically kind of hoping that the 41 will repeat itself. Yeah. Only that their allies this time will be the CIA, not the Third Reich.
Yeah,
and that they will again be in Zagreb having their own regime supported by the West this time. Which is interesting that they had so much energy. After all of these things that happened, like it's 47 and they're
Yeah, I mean, what else are you can do? Sit in one of those displaced persons camps and wait to get sent to Cleveland to live.
I mean, better than what they did.
I mean, it's interesting, because like when we were covering all of these like Serbian groups, like they were at the same time trying to escape Yugoslavia, and these assholes are coming back.
Yes,
secretly. Like what's going on here?
Well, I think they're far more fanatical in some sense.
For sure, yes, for sure. Although it's very interesting that it is mentioned that at the trial afterwards, they were tried together with a couple of Serbian guys, like a few Chetniks, like two Chetniks and one Croatian guy who was a part of this Chetnik group, who were sent by a Chetnik colonel Otsokolic from Trieste into Yugoslavia at the same time as these Ustashas. And for some reason, they were tried together. So I didn't get it, like if there was some communication between them, or was it just a coincidence that they came back at the same time? I don't know, but they were tried together, which is very interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
And, Trieste, we mentioned Trieste before when we were talking about Kavaja and those, actually the Father Kajevic, who escaped Yugoslavia through Trieste, how his Serbian national defense handler in Trieste was that CIA guy, who was also the head of the Serbian Church National Organization in Trieste, which was very wealthy, had millions, had some ocean liners, like some ships owned, and worked for the Americans. And now, probably through that connection, these Chetniks were sent to Yugoslavia in 1947 and arrested. Interestingly, the guy who sent them, that Chetnik colonel, I think, or Sokolic, he was killed by UDBA in the 1950s, and his murder led to the formation of SOPO.
Right.
So there is some connection there as well. Yeah.
And to me, one of the interesting things about this show, and since we kind of glossed over, I mean, we mentioned the Crusaders in our earlier episodes, we didn't go into much detail, but I think that like what was interesting to me, at least in the show, is that it's telling it from the Yugoslav secret police perspective, basically, and so it gives you a little bit of some insight onto how they were thinking and how they carried out this operation. And there's some kind of things that I noted there. For example, because they lured all these guys who were already abroad. They lured them back and then arrested them. It's pretty remarkable feat. And so when they're formulating what messages to send back to whatever Ustasha HQ in Austria, they said they have to be very careful to use about the language that they use, because of course we know. I don't know. I guess we did talk about this in Arc 2, but like the Ustashas also brought in their own kind of linguistic changes while they were in power, and had their own kind of their own vocabulary and all this other stuff. And so, this OZNA agent is very careful about that. He's like, he says a word and he says, no, change it to this. He says, we have to be very careful to use their language.
Yes. Although they are mostly these OZNA agents are Croatian guys, they are based in Zagreb, but they know that they have to use this fake super Croatian language that was invented.
Right.
Ustashski.
Yes. Yeah. It's and this repeats throughout the show.
Yes, that's every episode is more or less the same.
I mean, if it works. I mean, clearly they got results. No point in changing it. I like that they didn't change the go word at all. That's fun.
No.
Never thought that it would. I guess they were very confident that it was working so well that none of it would ever get back to anybody. So there was no point in changing it up, because everybody that they tricked with it, they caught, right?
Yes.
So fuck it.
And that seems pretty faithful to what actually happens. I mean, yeah. The other, my favorite part of the show, and I can't believe we haven't mentioned this yet, is the soundtrack.
Yeah.
It has a very bizarre, synth.
It's weird.
Sound. It's really weird. It reminds me of music from Dario Argento films.
Sure.
Who composed that? Was it Demon Goblin or something like this? Goblin. With weird synth sounds, and it doesn't it doesn't really match up with a lot of other films and series of that genre, which are we talked about The Written Off, Otpisani, way back in Arc 2, which has
awesome
a funk soundtrack.
So good.
You know what I mean? It's Shaft, but it's Yugoslav Shaft or whatever. And this is just eerie synth music and stoic, quiet guys doing a job.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this for Ustashas was probably a horror show.
Right. Because, maybe the music was there to terrify them.
Yeah, the music is almost kind of gives it some kind of a dystopian, kind of post-apocalyptic feeling.
Well, like Argento. I mean, it comes from horror films.
But it's strange because it's post-apocalyptic only from an Ustasha perspective,
Yeah.
It's almost made to troll them in some sense. Because, you see these Ustashas in a bad shape just wandering these woods. Right. And being scared, and then you have this music.
Yes.
It does look like an Ustasha nightmare or something.
Yes. Yeah, there's a monster out there eating Ustasha in the woods. And it's Yugoslav Secret Service. Yes.
I mean, that's not far off from how they looked at things. I mean, one thing with the Crusaders specifically is that it played a big role in their propaganda in the Cold War period. Because those are the ultimate heroes, the guys who, were so committed that they continued to fight on against all odds or whatever. And that's another, box that gets ticked off in their martyrdom narrative of the post-war period. So, the Bleiburg massacres or reparation, massacres, and then the Crusaders. And that's, they developed this into a kind of myth. during the Cold War period that they bring up constantly in their publication, right? The legendary heroes, the Crusaders, and the like. Luburic also was, right, supposed to be a commander of the Crusader units.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the scenes are mostly the scenes of them getting arrested in the forest, and the scenes of them being interrogated. There are a few scenes that are a bit different. Like there is one Ustasha who tries to take a gun while in prison from the security guys, asking for a cigarette and then grabbing his gun, and he ends up dead. There's like a fight, and he ends up dead. And then there is that strange Ustasha guy. I don't remember which one it is, but it's like an important Ustasha guy who's trying to think of the ways how to escape.
Yeah.
And then he has this crazy idea how, I guess he was some kind of an engineer, and then he claims how he invented some new form of energy that will change the fate of humanity. And
give it to me.
Wants to talk to a physicist and the state security
I want to see a
guys.
physicist and a ghost right now.
Yes, exactly. And the state security guy is like, okay, like that won't happen. And then because that doesn't work, he decides just to try to escape. Which I think he stabs one of the Yugoslav guys.
He does, yeah. It's one of the few action moments that isn't just people being arrested. There's one in the very beginning when the first group gets arrested, a guy gets shot and has a very comical death to me. It reminds me of some of those deaths in partisan movies where it's like super exaggerated. Like the guy gets shot and then rolls down a hill.
Pushes himself all the way down a hill.
Yeah. It's a very comical way to me. It's like, in the partisan films where guy shoots 10 bullets and 50 Germans fall down.
Right.
This is that kind of thing. But I did note that as one of the rare moments, action scenes. And I think that's the third episode or something? It's pretty late in the series.
Yes.
Wait, where the dude rolls down the hill? That's the first...
No, that's the first episode. But this other one where the guy stabs a guard while trying to escape.
Yeah.
But again, so it follows the formula. Once they get arrested, they give the bio of the person, the narrator comes on, gives the bio of the person that they arrested. And likewise, when something's like that happen, the narrator comes back on. And I think he even says something out of all of the arrested, none of them managed to escape, and 2 were killed in the process of trying to escape or something. It's very authoritative voice telling you the facts. It
is a weird show. There's no surprises in it then whatsoever. It's almost like a biblical text. It just
there is the surprise comes in only at the 4th episode. I think the 4th episode's kind of the most dynamic in some sense, because it opens with the OZNA guys learning that Pavelic is no longer in Italy and that he's made it to South America, and so they're starting to question, what kind of capabilities they actually have if Pavelic has gone that far away. What does that mean? And then of course the break, the Tito Stalin break happens, and that's the only thing that kind of adds a dimension of action or urgency to the plot, to the narrative, because the one OZNA guy is definitely a Stalinist. No,
well, they all were, I think.
No, but he says something specifically, he criticizes the Yugoslav government for breaking with Stalin, which is interesting. He says something we'll become a colony of the imperialist powers or something like that.
Okay.
So I think they're kind of framing him as being on that side of the thing, but they were okay, so we need to work fast now that
because they know that the Soviets know that these Ustashas are coming, and the Soviets, after the split, because it's already 48, the Soviets will use this against the Yugoslavs by trying to claim how the Yugoslavs are working together with the Ustashas.
Yes.
So they have to come out clean and tell the public what was going on in the past year with them arresting all of these Ustashas, which means they will have to stop arresting them. But they are not satisfied with this because they want to try to arrest this very important Ustasha, who's kind of ahead of this whole operation, who's called Božidar Kavran, and whose code name is Gvardijan, and he's the he's the guy who's, running this whole operation. And they want to try to get him to come to Yugoslavia. So they get an additional 1 week to wrap up the whole operation and to try to get him to come back to Yugoslavia. And they decided they have nothing to lose, so they will just send a message to Ustasha's abroad, like to this Gvardijan guy, Božidar Kavran, listen, you have to come. We are having basically a serious resistance movement in Yugoslavia. And if you don't come, you're just out of it. We won't count on you anymore.
Oh. Yeah, and one of the OZNA agents is like, okay, what we should tell him is that because of like the political situation in the country, like, the break with Stalin, this is kind of an opportunity to do something.
Yeah. And it works. He comes and they arrest him.
But it's a pretty anticlimactic arrest, much like the rest of them. It's almost the same, except that like when Kavran confronts like when he's meeting with this OZNA agent who he doesn't know is an OZNA agent, the guy just says, "We are all agents of the state security apparatus," and then they come and arrest him. And that's it. Like it's not particularly exciting. It's just like the rest of the arrests, except that they state who they are very kind of proudly to him before they arrest him.
Yeah. So they got now all like 96 of them in prison, and they just decide, like the Yugoslav State Security decides to just troll the Ustashas abroad as the finale, and they send a message to them
through their coded,
through the coded radio, and they literally say, "We fucked you over. All of you are now in our prisons."
Yeah. And that's my favorite thing, because that really apparently did happen, and it's done in telegram form. So it goes, "We fucked you all over. Stop. All of your people are in our prisons. Stop." I mean, that's some high level dunking, like just complete trolling on them. Like, it's like we literally fucked you over.
It's such a good, if you know you've got to burn a secret code, it's such a good use of it, Have fun with it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just imagining like how that looked, They're like, okay, well, we keep getting telegrams from HQ asking what's happening. What should we tell them? And be like, I don't know, tell them the truth. Some guy's just like, all right. Fuck them.
Yep.
There are a few other gems in the show, like interesting things. In episode 3, there's that kind of weird little subplot with Dr. Moser. Did you catch anything about that? That was kind of meant to be the link between Western intelligence and the Ustasha movement abroad.
Yeah. Moser is a Nazi, right? Like in Germany.
Yes.
Who works for the Western intelligence.
Yes, they say first he worked with Hitler and now he works with the Americans. And I'm kind of wondering who that character is based off of.
Yeah.
Because, I don't know, I didn't really look it up. What's interesting, again, about the show is
like maybe, I was thinking, like, is it Galen? Or
That's what I was thinking too. But it's interesting because nobody else in this show, there aren't any made-up characters. Like, if you look up any of the people that they talk about, on the Ustasha side, they're all real people.
Right.
Pretty much, right?
Well, if he's a doctor,
and that's
maybe
kind
he
of
was
the
like
point.
Dr. Six. You remember him, one of Gellen's boys.
Yeah. And
a lot of doctors in that circle.
Fake ones, too.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, that was an interesting thing to me because, that's where, he said, I was sent by the Croatian government in exile to establish contacts with Western intelligence. And they're more interested in like Yugoslav troop movements and troop concentrations around Trieste. And I was supposed to go and report back to them about these things. It's interesting also how many, how it always follows the formula. They arrest the guy and then there's the interrogation scene. The interrogation scene, like almost all of them just readily surrender all their information.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's not really any kind of hardcore interrogation. They're just like, yep, you caught me. Yes, I killed 63 children and, Stara Gradiška, no, wasn't enough. Like all of them are just start talking. And part of me was like, well, okay, they didn't, it is still made in the 80s. They didn't want to show like an OZNA guy beating the shit out of these guys. But they do actually, they do touch on the fact that like the conditions that they're being kept in aren't great, right? One of the Ustasha's complaints to the guards, he's like, "Oh, the conditions in this prison are terrible. There's rats everywhere, and I demand that the International Red Cross come and inspect this prison." And the OZNA guy just looks at him and says, "We inherited this prison from you, so I hope we understand each other now." And then just leaves him.
Nice line.
So that was kind of implying that, like these guys weren't, it wasn't Club Med for them,
No. Although it also wasn't Jasenovac as well.
But it also wasn't Jasenovac, yeah.
Mm.
And another thing that was funny to me, I mean, not funny, it's just an observation, because it has this very documentary style narration where they're detailing the crimes of all these people. This reminds me of the narrative you hear from lots of like Serbian nationalists these days that are like, the communists were afraid to talk about Ustasha crimes and they never like said that they did anything against Serbs. And like, this is a show in which like every episode's like, and this guy liquidated all these Serbs and
right. Yeah.
It's complete horseshit. It's of course. But that debate came up again. What was it, last year when that movie Dada of Jasenovac came out?
Mm-hmm.
And like the filmmaker was like, I had to make this gore fest film about Jasenovac because the communists were always too afraid to talk about it or something. And
then someone made a list of all the films about Jasenovac filmed in Yugoslavia, and there's like every decade there's like at least two.
Did you guys notice any of the comments on the actual film?
No,
on YouTube?
I didn't. No.
I always like little comment wars on these kinds of things because there inevitably will be some.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like some.
Because all of this, the show is on YouTube. But only in Serbo-Croatian. So
yes, which we don't usually do that. We usually do films and stuff that have subtitles most of the time. But
I appreciate that.
Yeah, but I mean, this is it's a little bit of a deep cut when it comes to these, like films and series from this time period.
Yeah.
They're like comments obviously from like pro Ustasha guys being like, oh, they filmed lies, and then there's some guy saying, long live the Udba and OZNA and the Communist Party of Yugoslavia and stuff like that. So they duke it out in the comments on these kinds of things always. It's fun to see.
So at the end of the last episode, there are actually some footage from the actual trial.
Yes, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and you can actually see one of these Ustashas, like, and hear him say some things at the trial, and being interrogated or like questioned at a trial. That was interesting.
Because then it fully embraces the documentary aspect of the series and like the last 10 minutes or whatever. Last episode is just archival footage.
Yeah. So 70 something of them were executed. The high ups, like the worst ones, the most important ones, were executed by hanging, and the rest by they were shot. And then I guess around 20 of them got prison terms.
Yeah.
There is a scene earlier when the guys, like the OZNA guys, meet their kind of boss, who I'm not sure if that's the Minister of Interior of Croatia, I think, or someone like that. Yeah. Also wearing a kind of uniform that they wear, and they have a meeting with him. And I suppose that's supposed to be Stevo Krajačić in reality, who I think was kind of behind this whole operation. And Stevo Krajačić is like one of these very kind of enigmatic and also kind of mythological, almost communist era figures. His real name was Ivan Krajačić, and Stevo was his like communist name. And he's almost a kind of antipode to Mustafa Golubić. So we had an episode on Mustafa Golubić that everyone should listen to.
Yes.
Mustafa Golubić was this mythologized figure because he was a Muslim guy from Bosnia who became a part of Young Bosnia and then of the Black Hand and then a Chetnik in the Balkan Wars. And then after that, a communist and a kind of international, man of mystery, spy,
Hitman.
assassin, for Stalin, assassinating people in the US and stealing like military shit from the French and like all of that. And then he was like, according to this whole mythology, he was supposed to be, the leader of the partisan resistance, but was arrested by the Gestapo in 1941 in Belgrade, tortured and killed. And, in this kind of mythology, that would be some kind of an important thing because, you would have a guy who's the leader of the partisan movement who also is a Chetnik. So, who knows what, in this alternative history would mean.
Right.
But anyway, Stevo Krajačić usually in these stories is the one who's blamed for the death of Mustafa Golubić. And he's the guy who supposedly tipped him off, ratted him to the Gestapo on behalf of Tito, who wanted to get rid of Mustafa Golubić because he was competition. I mean, this is the narrative,
Right.
How true it is, I don't know. But Stevo Krajačić himself was a communist since the 20s and was, participated in the Spanish Civil War and then in the partisan movement and was the first Minister of Interior in Croatia after the war. And he is often the guy who was seen as a kind of a power, in the shadows of the communist apparatus in Croatia specifically, and also in Yugoslavia. Sometimes it is said that even Tito was afraid of him for some reasons because supposedly he had a direct kind of connection with the Soviets. But
they said the same thing about Rankovic too. No?
Yeah. No. I mean, that's the whole story. I don't know. I did meet his grandson, I think.
Oh
really?
Who's like a punk guy from Zagreb.
Nice.
A nice guy. I think he's like, I'm 95% that it's his grandson. I know that guy's grandfather was some super important Croatian communist guy, but I think it's Stevo Krajačić almost certainly. And he's like a nice kind of punk guy who likes anti-fascist, who likes to drink a lot and likes to cook, and like he cooks food for like punk events. He's also like a martial arts expert who like trains punks in self-defense and so on.
Awesome.
And one time he ate 100 cevapi for a bet. and that's actually that's the same thing. Exact same thing was done by my grandfather as well. He did eat 100 cevapi for a bet.
Cevapi, if you're not familiar, are little sausage type guys, kind of like koftas that are popular throughout the region.
Yeah, if you have 10 of them, that's more than enough. But 100, it's like insane.
5 is like a small portion. 10 is like a regular portion with onions and maybe kaimak and a little bread guy. So 100 is
insane.
Yeah.
Legends abound.
So all in all, I don't know. I couldn't really super recommend this show. I mean, if you speak Serbo-Croatian, then sure, why not? But if you don't, then you don't necessarily need to sit through 3 hours of it. But it's got its moments, and it's interesting to see it from that perspective, since we focused this arc exclusively on reading Ustasha texts and the like. It's a little change, switch up.
I mean, it is satisfying somehow to see them all being arrested in this very repetitive way.
It's very methodical. No, I can't tell if that's like necessarily a deliberate choice or just low budget, not great filmmaking.
Maybe it's just like
or storytelling, but.
I mean, if it did happen like that, apparently, so maybe he was just being accurate.
Yeah. I'm sure there was a lot more action, though. It was like lure in like 90 fascists from abroad and conduct like very complex operations to arrest and kill some of them. And,
but on the other hand, right? On the other hand, you've got like how the FBI portrays itself in TV and film, where it's all action, and really what they should be showing is like, I guess we'll set some other teenager up again today, right? And they're like, yeah, I mean, just
true.
Stick them on the docket, It probably is
it's
also
just
very
in the pantheon of like Yugoslav World War II narratives. It's very slow.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
But
definitely.
I think they probably deliberately wanted to portray them as a kind of pathetic and already defeated force.
Yeah.
So there's no need for action. They're already like just defeated. They just don't realize it.
Yeah, they do seem very sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, again, a pretty insane thing for Ustasha to come back to Yugoslavia in 47 and 48. I'm pretty amazed that they thought this would be a good thing.
Well, they needed to add some more martyrs.
I mean, they had probably their CIA connections back in the West, and they could.
The OZNA guy does ask the one guy about the Catholic Church's connections too. That was kind of interesting. And the guy says something about some sort of cardinal or whatever it was. I kind of zoned out at that point. So I think that's like end of episode 3.
No, they mentioned the priest that we talked about. No, the one who later came back to Yugoslavia. What's the name? I think they mentioned
Draganovic.
Draganovic.
But they used some other name that was similar.
Okay,
and I think it was supposed to be him.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
I spent a long time today looking for any Yugoslav version of Bad Boys. The classic Inner Circle song on Cops, and sadly, it was never like schlagerized or anything. It's not out there.
I always thought that was such a strange choice of
it really is.
Song for a show about cops.
Yeah.
This is like in Jamaican patois too, and like what you gonna do when they come for you? They chuck it on your brother and they chuck it on your sister. They chuck it on like it's I always thought it was odd. And then like I recently, I don't know. I did watch an episode. We watched Cops together,
of course,
months ago. Fritz.
Oh my God! Yeah, you were showing me some highlights, various regional highlights. I didn't realize you were a connoisseur.
But like after that little Cops binging session that we went on, I was going home and I was like, what the fuck is up with the Cops song?
Yeah.
They choose like something else, like a cock rock song or something. Something that cops would actually listen to.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. No, but sadly, I think there is no version.
I found some poor kid just in some house in Serbia yelling. I think he's saying "Loshi Momci" over the Cops song as it plays in his living room. So I guess that's the closest that they got.
You want to use
funny,
that?
though, honestly.
Yeah, sure. I'll put it in. We'll close the show with it. Yeah.
No, we got to close with the weird synth music because I actually like that.
It's
very strange. Yeah.
Good stuff.
So I guess we should tell the audience what we got coming up next in the coming weeks. We're going to have a little bit of, end of arc switch up. Before we get to because like the end of the arc will cover some of this organized crime stuff, but since we still need some more time to prepare that, we're gonna do some other stuff in the meantime. And I think everybody could use a little bit of a palate cleanser from
Ustasha every day.
Yeah, it's a lot. I was tallying it up because it's like, damn, if somebody would listen to this entire arc, it's a lot more information than anybody maybe needs about these guys. And just the Ustasha stuff in alone, I think there's 10 episodes that I did
for sure. I don't
over
know.
the last couple months. I mean, it's a lot. So
that's months of Ustasha information.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what our podcast is. More information than you need about very fucked up people.
But somehow not more than people want, which still blows my mind. That someone out there is like, oh no, now? I was just getting into it.
Yeah.
But the organized crime stuff will be fun because that's
we will go back to Sopo and then connect it to organized crime, and we will end the arc with that. But that's also set up the grounds for some future arc that will go more into like the organized crime stuff, and that opens up the whole 90s thing.
Which we all know is what you really want.
Well, but eventually we had to go to the 90s.
Yeah.
But that's good. That's a ways away, I think.
That's why we started in the 19th century. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You didn't say which 90s, did you, listeners? 17, baby.
Yeah. The best 90s.
The best 90s. The 1790s.
I don't know. The 1890s were pretty wild. Honestly, that would have been kind of a crazy
90s,
time to be alive.
Yeah, any 90s is better than our 90s, really, if I think back.
Yeah. Depends on where you were, I guess, in the world.
Yeah, sure.
Somewhere is always having their 90s, you know?
There are 90s?
Yes, there are the Balkan 90s.
Yeah, that's true. The famous tech boom of the Harappans in the... Yeah. All right, guys.
All right. Well, see you
back in the F-Files.
See you back in the F-Files. Yay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. Sci-fi day. All right, guys.
More weirdness. All right.
Later.
Later.
Bye.